Welcome everyone to the Azure Red Hat OpenShift video series. I am Roy, I work for Microsoft and I'm part of the global black belt team as an application innovation specialist. And today I'm joined by
Yury Titov. I'm a senior email black belt for Red Hat Managed Services. So today we would be talking about cost management for Aero. The reason for it is quite straightforward, right? Because finances matter. And essentially it should be noted that this topic is not so complicated as it seems quite often, right? It's rather complex. So therefore, to highlight, different aspects of it, I would probably, Roy, ask you, what tools do we have in Azure for cost management?
Sure. So let me start off by saying we have the Azure Price Calculator. And with this Azure Price Calculator, you can actually define every single service that you want to use in Azure. You can configure it, and based on your requirements and your configuration, a monthly price comes out of it, right? The cool thing with this Azure Price Calculator is that you can actually log in with your company credentials as well. And if you have any discounts or special things in your contract, it will reflect in that Azure Price Calculator. So this is an easy way to get an estimate. Let's take an Azure Red Hat OpenShift cluster. I select the service, I select which worker nodes I want to use, which OS disks I want to attach, which master nodes, and this will give me an estimate of this is what it's gonna cost me on a monthly basis. Now, because it's a hyperscale platform, Azure, a public cloud, what we can actually do is we can do different financial modeling. So one of the things that we do often is the pay-as-you-go model. And you basically pay for what you use, right? If you use it for an hour, you pay for an hour. If you use it for 8 hours, guess what? You're paying for 8 hours. Very flexible, but also the most expensive way of doing this. So we have another financial model called reserved instances. You're basically gonna reserve specific capacity. What you're gonna do is you're gonna say, look, I will have these masters, I will have these workers, and I'm gonna run this 24/7 for the next year. I'm not gonna scale this down or delete it or whatever. And if you tell us that you're committed to do that, what we will do is give you an additional discount, right? It removes the flexibility as pay-as-you-go, but it reduces the cost of the service because you're committed to doing that with us. And you can do this for 1 year or for 3 years, yeah. So what we see a lot of customers do is mix and match those financial models. If you run an Azure Red Hat OpenShift cluster, let's take the bare minimum, and you're gonna do that under reserved instances to have a little bit of discount, a cheaper price. But now if you need to scale up, because OpenShift actually allows you to quickly scale up and have burstable scenarios, and with the compute resources of Azure, indeed, you can actually add that pay-as-you-go layer and scale it up for a couple of hours, scale it down again, and you will pay that specific part under the pay-as-you-go model.
Flexible.
Super flexible. The cool thing is as well, because it's a first-party service, you pay for Azure Red Hat OpenShift directly through Microsoft. It's not that they need to pay you separately and they need to pay us for the resources. No, it's one Azure bill, and Azure Red Hat OpenShift is on top of that as well.
Single bill.
Single bill for the customer. Make it as easy as possible. The last thing that we have, which I would like to mention, is the cost management tooling of Azure. It's built in Azure, and this shows some trends or analyzes. You can see the burn rate, and actually a really cool tool to look at your Azure services. What are you paying? What are you gonna pay? Do some forecasting and etc. Now, I know this is all Azure and specifically on the whole Aero cluster, but there's obviously a little bit more to financial modeling and capacity in that sense. So if you look at the OpenShift part, could you tell me a little bit about that?
Exactly. So after we set capacity and we have our cluster running, right? What we put on top of it is basically workload of a particular customer, workloads, which could be really many for many tenants, etc. That should show how in timeline cost management actually evolves, right? For different product services, etc., which reflect institutional organization, or could be teams, products, and so on and so forth. Let me probably show it on the diagram what tools we have for cost management in Aero.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so we set it on Azure level for cost management, and now we need to specify also cost model for our workloads, right? Let us take a look what it consists from. Well, when you install a cost management operator in an Aero cluster, basically what it starts doing, it starts checking your inventory and corresponding capacity, right, for nodes and things. where you basically specify a price. Additionally, it collects also metrics, where you also specify a price for things like, I don't know, CPU, memory, etc. Additionally, it collects so-called Azure raw costs. Well, they are not raw, but they called raw, so they also go as an input. To answer the question how this data is collected, let us take a look at this part. So as I mentioned, we install cost management operator that after activation start generating CSV files. Yes, comma separated value files, good old, and copy them over encrypted connection over TLS transport into encrypted database. So everything is secure and preserved, yeah, with corresponding levels of security and access to cloudredhat.com, where the data is aggregated for derived costs and being prepared. But you actually can open those files and take a look into them. So the most interesting part in your cost model is derived costs. So, and as we mentioned, basic costs serve as input into derived costs. Derived costs are essential parts of your cost management, and they could be applied to a project space within Azure cluster. It could be applied to a whole cluster. Maybe you have several clusters, and that's why you're interested in this. Development, test, production clusters, several production clusters with different workloads, etc. You could also attach and specify derived costs for particular nodes if you have different instances, and also for additional Azure services or subs, right? So that's why you get a distribution here. Okay, and the reason you are doing this, basically, is to get the full picture about cost management that actually creates a transparency, converts your resources consumption on workload level, project service level for technical colleagues and for business people, right? Because business matter. And actually, there would be some parts that have shared semantics. The tool in cost management of Arrow that you could do for Red Hat is basically tags. Tags are everything. And this is so simple and flexible tool that you could mark with tags actually, for example, different tenants here for technical people, or a marketing campaign for a particular service. It could be, for example, particular business unit or region, geography. So it could be, for example, particular orchestra that is being provisioned. So provisioning. And some additional things like groups or users with security. Users. All right. And additionally, last but not least, for example, something like financial statements for particular products or services. And as I said at the end, the key core semantics is to get the shared information for products, services, and particular workloads you have actually on your cost management model. Important to mention is also that as long as you specify this, you start collecting data, you have also your cost model with derived costs. That Red Hat Cost Management tool also creates a forecast using machine learning mechanisms. So, and that helps you to support, for example, with things like allocating budget. If you need more budget, if consumption goes up. If you need, for example, to reduce amount of nodes, etc., if consumption goes down and actually you need less budget, which is also an important point for the planning. And especially if you have a multi-tenant cluster, additional important thing is that in your cost model in cloudredhat.com, you could specify different roles for different users, right? So they could see only particular groups for particular projects, services, etc. So this is then role-based access control. And that's essentially how you could form a cost model for your workloads.
That was super insightful. And to be very honest, nice drawing.
Oh, thank you. But, well, now we said Azure level focused cost management, and also we said cost management for workloads inside of Azure, right, with Red Hat tools. What should we do with it, Troy?
Use it.
Okay.
Now, to be fully honest around that, so I think the first thing is enable this. Right? And it's out of the box, it's easy to enable. And I think if you combine both systems, so the tools and capabilities from Azure and then the tools and capabilities of Red Hat and what Red Hat created around in OpenShift, you get a full idea of the whole cost around the solution.
Complemented.
100%. The cool thing is that if you enable this, you combine the different data points that you have, you can actually be super flexible and adapt it to your financial strategy. Maybe you need to create or talk to billing systems, or maybe chargeback mechanisms. Maybe you want to do some forecasting on your burn rate for your IT systems, and etc. So those capabilities all are at your fingertips when you start to enable it and use it. And do you want to learn more about Azure Red Hat OpenShift? Go check out the other amazing videos that we have created. Or what you can do is reach out to Red Hat or Microsoft, and we're more than happy to help and support you in this journey.